So my understanding is that, and I will be disabused, is that we are here to talk about old school and new school. Like he has any right to think he's in anywhere near my school.
Hey, I didn't ask to be here.
I know. They
Let's two of us.
Well, you can leave. I'm perfectly.
I can.
Understand. I mean, understand. When I do a convention panel, and it's just me and a microphone, I get a very small crowd. This is larger than I normally get, and it's a small crowd nonetheless. But what happens is, people who show up tell their friends who didn't make it that they've missed a really fun hour's worth of experience, because I am truly a very difficult and comically fun human being.
That is very true.
I mean, there are those who are cursed with Tourette's. I have Tourette's. And I'm a great believer in an unfiltered relationship with my audience, because this means I don't have to remember the lie that I told you tomorrow morning. I am a straight shooter. I have opinions. I am waiting to get the shit kicked out of me sooner rather than later. But it hasn't happened yet. I think it's because people aren't paying that much attention like they used to. So that's the deal. So apparently, I represent an older idea, and Mahdi represents a new take on that idea. I've seen his work, and he doesn't really. You know, I don't know exactly what the intention. Are you working professionally, making a living?
I am, yeah.
A good living?
I made a living nonetheless.
Define a living.
I live.
You have a second. You have a day job?
No.
So you fucking man.
I'm alive. I'm alive.
Well, your expectations, their standards are pretty low, I bet.
Extremely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just so we know. Well, you know, look. I mean, I should explain. Well, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I will.
Oh, you should.
Okay. I came to understand. How old are you?
32.
Okay. When I turned 34, I came to understand two seriously important notions in my life. One, that I could no longer accommodate the weather, the constant changing of weather in New York City. I was born in Jersey, raised in New York. I've lived in all the boroughs at one point or another. And I realized that I had outgrown my love of the change of seasons. I miss the seasons. No, you don't. No, you don't. You miss the idea of missing the seasons. You know, and that's just nonsense. At any rate, that combined with the fact that I also had an epiphany and realized that I was generating an enormous lot of critical attention, mostly good, some bad. I was fool enough to actually read my reviews in those days. I never read them anymore. And I came to understand that it hadn't translated in any way into money. And that at 34, I had the understanding that there was potential I was going to live to be 50. I might get that old. And that I had to do something about that to make it possible for me to live. And that meant finding a way to make it an ancillary source of income, and comics was never going to be that, because I don't have a commercial footprint at all. You know, people who've seen me at my table know that Walter's got this army of fucking whores, you know, and I have a couple of people show up for me. And I understand why. Walter's a nicer person than I am, and he also is much more interested. He's willing to do much more commercial things than I do. I don't care. I mean, I dismissed so much of the work that I did until I was 32. That it turns people off. And again, caring is not something I bring to the table. So I moved to California the day before I turned 35, with the assumption I'd be back shortly. I've lived in California more than half my life now. As I say, I'm 73 and a half. And one of the results of that is I was able to use the cachet that I had developed critically in the early 80s to find work in other media, first in movies and in television. Television saved my life. I never worked on a show I'd watch because they were all shit. In those days, television, the work I did, the market for television that I worked in those days no longer exists. It was replaced by streaming. And when I hear that they're spending money on a per episode basis on the same amount of money that we would shoot 8 episodes for, is staggering to me. But it gave me a pension and real estate, and it taught me the value of saving and taking care of myself. And when I look at a guy like that, who's young and is working in a business that is literally melting around his ankles, and is doing idiosyncratic and personal work that is not in any way address what is perceived as the commercial need of the market, I worry for him. I mean it, because I recognize the trial and struggle that I have had in addressing the fact that, with all due respect, comic book fans have a fairly two-dimensional view of the way the world functions and works. It's most of you people have with all due respect, which means go fuck yourselves. That you identify the rejection of a notion as bitter envy, and I am bitter but never envious. You know, I pointed out to someone recently that nothing offends me at all. There's no such thing as too soon in my life, but my feelings are easily hurt. So I avoid reading anything about me, positive or negative, because if I take the positive seriously, I also have to take the blame seriously and fuck you all. I just don't have any interest in that. Want to introduce yourself, Phil?
Sure, I'd love to.
You can use a mic, but it reaches all the way back.
You really
guys
don't
all
need
hear
it.
it.
I mean, look, you got a big mouth like me.
Voice carries.
Yeah.
Should.
Yeah, I'm 32. I've been making comics for the last 2.5 years. Before that, I was pursuing music, doing the gigs in New York and everything, and just trying to become a musician, trying to be the next Bob Dylan, but that wasn't going to happen. And then COVID happened, and all the gigs melted at my ankles, or melted completely. And so I had to find a different way to express the stories I wanted to tell, and comics seemed like a medium that I had sort of forgotten in my youth, and that I rekindled that love when I was, like 2021 in my room, nothing else to do, so I just started drawing, and I invented this thing called Superhero Comics, which was this publishing house that the idea was that it's been around since the 50s, and so it's been rivaling Marvel and DC this whole time, and every one of my books has different ads and fake stories about how, you know, Stan was one of my biggest competitors, but I got him in the end, and all these things, you know. And so that's how I found
Did it involve prison rape?
Did it what? Come again?
I said, did it involve prison rape?
Come again? No.
We're talking like this in the front of Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
You know, keep talking.
That's okay. They'll learn a lot.
And yeah, and then the last couple of years, I've slowly, you know, I was working a day job before. I was doing coffee, and I would do my.
You were a
panel.
barista?
I was a barista. I was a bartender too. I was a night guard maybe at some point.
Wow.
Yeah, working class guy.
You bring it. Yeah, I'll blue collar myself.
Yeah.
But, you know, no college over here.
No college yet.
No.
They do.
Barely got out of high school.
White people.
No, yeah. I mean, they got rid of me because they didn't want to see me anymore.
Well, that's understandable. No, I'm kidding.
It is understandable. My feelings are easily hurt.
Oh,
Please go on.
No.
No, so I was working this coffee job and doing my panels in between espressos, and then little by little, I started just making books. And one thing I learned in the independent game, I never thought I would be published by a big publisher, so I never bothered trying. And so I started observing the independent sphere, and I realized that the one thing that would separate someone who's going to make it and someone who wasn't going to make it was the volume of work. And so I just decided, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a page a day for the rest of my life. I'm just going to go and put out book after book. I'm going to be a monthly comic book artist and put all my stuff in it and everything. And then month after month, slowly, readers started coming and conventions started going. And then I started getting invited to conventions, and then I had a big boost by Cartoonist Kayfabe, which was a great YouTube channel, and they showcased my work, and now it's been kind of, now I'm here doing a panel with legends, you know? It's like,
About fucking time.
yeah.
So when you did Kayfabe, did Pisco and Rugg know your work before you showed up?
I had met them briefly at conventions, just kind of showing my stuff.
Right. Okay.
But I was a new kid on the block, so they just kind of, the first work I showed them versus the work that they showcased was very different, because I was learning on the page. And, but no, they didn't really know.
Did you get my text? I just texted you.
You did?
I did.
We could not find this place.
But that's because you're idiots.
How did we find this place?
Boy Scouts brought us.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what happened. You didn't get it.
I didn't
No,
get
you,
it.
you know why? Because they're afraid of him.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Because he reads terrorists.
It's what the new school represents.
He's one step away from being indicted.
It's 15 minutes.
I don't know
Would
what
you
happened.
stop whining and complaining?
To be fair, it's the most exercise he'll get all day. So that's
But he's so fit.
He said something nice about you folks. Okay?
No. Stand up.
Uh-oh.
Dean Haspiel, ladies and gentlemen. I've known Dean since he was 16 years old. Dean was my assistant, and he just before I made that move west. I did not move west because of him. Dean is one of my favorite people in the world, even though he barely acknowledges me in his CV. Fuck you, man.
What's a CD?
See, what's a CG? What's a CG? A curriculum vitae.
A resume.
Where you came from and why you are here.
Yes.
Okay. Dean is one of my favorite people in the world, despite himself. And I promised I would not do the dance.
We'll give it a minute.
Okay.
It's all
I
right.
think I guess you got your text.
Read your text. Bear with me a moment, won't you?
Oh, yeah.
Dean saved me.
No! Don't say it out loud, you fuck. No, the last time I texted Dean on a panel was when I was on a panel with First Comic celebrating his 40th anniversary. And I was literally waiting for everybody else on the street of talent to have a stroke. And they were just sucking the life out of the room. There was like crotch dust coming out. And I'm fucking dying. I'm on the end. And Dean and a couple of other people I know were in the audience, and I was texting them, and everybody was laughing inappropriately while these guys were going on in this fucking drone about their endless experience. And again, I was waiting for someone to stroke out. You know, I had a list. You know, right? Tell me I'm wrong. You know.
Well, would you call Dean new school or old school? I mean,
I would call Dean dead school.
Dead school.
He's
Cool.
Dean is to a certain extent. Dean has. If you're okay with talking about your night like you're not here, and to a certain extent, it's true for you as well. There's a courage that underpins the work that stands against the corporate franchise, the commercial franchise. And Dean, there used to be a guy named Alan Kupperberg. Alan Kupperberg's brother, Paul Kupperberg, was a longtime editor and contributor at DC Comics. Alan was a guy who, if he had applied himself just a little bit, he could have had a serious career. Because he was clever, he was not a bad picture maker, but his finishes weren't there. And he was an engine of resentment, an engine of anger. And yet he was never able to address that resentment, that anger, by effort. Dean, had he made a choice 20 years ago to adjust his perspective on the work, I think it's probably true of you as well, Mahdi, could have found a venue, an agenda that would have found favor in the commercial marketplace, at least temporarily, because the marketplace is so fickle and so transcendent, so transient. But Dean chose not to, and Dean pursued other interests. And as Mahdi did music, Dean saw theatrical work, and as we like to call him, Emmy-winning comic book artist, Dean. And I respect that enormously. But I also understand that the risk in that, which I have taken, I circumvented that risk by working as a whore on really shitty television for 15 years. To be able to save my life at this age. I worry about this guy. He's 32. Dean is 51.
57.
57.
It's nice to meet you older.
he's still using half, so.
I worry dearly because there's no safety net for you guys.
Yeah. No, it's great.
That's just really, it's fucked. I mean, you own nothing,
Well, I own everything that I make.
but you own nothing in the concrete world. You're at the service of a society and a culture that will bring no empathy or sympathy to you as you age.
For sure. But it's my job, I guess, as a young artist to become that culture. You know?
Good luck.
Try. Yeah, of course.
No, I mean, I hate to be a buzzkill, but that's just the way reality functions.
Can I add a little something to it? Because I know what you're talking about. I think it's when you or we are not slaves, but we need publishers, we need editors, we need distribution, and then you try to carve your own path.
Right.
Let's say Kickstarter or something, and you did do a Kickstarter or something.
Against my better judgment.
But how does that feel? What do you
It left me very hinky. I did not like it. I did not like the experience. No, because I felt it was a very judgy experience. What's that?
How so?
I have avoided doing crowdfunding of any kind because I do not have a commercial footprint. I have a cult audience and I'm a small figure. I mean, everybody, Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is a book that I did when I was 26, and it is wrapped in a narrative of bitterness and resentment for a number of reasons. Anecdotally, I did work that was subpar on the material, but it is the equivalent of the Old Testament of a secular religion. I expected there to be a secular religion to arise in the early 21st century, but I expected it to revolve around Elvis Presley. I'm quite serious. And the fact is, I broke the script down into 6 issues of a comic book. Roy Thomas had no idea what was going to be on those pages, and we saw the pencils from me. He wrote from those pencils. I had no idea. I'd drawn 2.5 issues, maybe 3, when I finally saw the movie on screen and recognized the fact that this was going to be a much bigger deal than I could have anticipated, because the stills that I had to work with looked like an IKEA in Finland, and the 17 McQuarrie paintings were aspirational, as all production art is, and the movie ended up looking like the McQuarrie painting. The legend is the movie cost $9 million to make. It may have cost $9 million to make, but what was it, an additional $17 million for post? Is that it? $17 million for post, and that's a lot of money even at 77. So Stan was objected strenuously from doing this book. He did not want to do the comic book because he didn't want to do any licensing. Marvel was in the process of going bankrupt. And Roy Thomas convinced Stan to publish this book. And the book, because the pre-publicity for the movie was working phenomenally well, that this niche market product became a universal concept. And the book, the adaptation of the material, sold millions and millions of copies. And I mean millions and millions of copies in various published formats. And my compensation for that was a complete and total $1,800. Okay.
And you see nothing in reprints
No.
at this point.
Yeah. So, it was like that restaurant where the food is really lousy and the portions are really small. So my bitterness is attached to the fact that the minute the product was doing well, Stan took full credit for having it. He presents it, of course, he's presenting it. That I ended up making next to nothing in terms of compensation for saving the company from bankruptcy. And that what did save the company from bankruptcy is subpar work from me, which will haunt me for the rest of my life, which is now the most popular work I've ever done because it represents, as I say, the Old Testament text of a secular religion. A niche market product that found favor in a market that had nothing to do with our internalized culture. And so I signed books, I signed Star Wars comic books, for people who, let us look at numbers and metrics. There are approximately 250,000 people in the entire United States who buy all the comic books we make. 250,000 people at most. We are not a universalist market. That's it, 250,000 people. And out of the 250,000 people, probably somewhere between 35,000 to 38,000 have any idea that I've done anything other than Star Wars in my entire life.
Probably 2 people in this room.
I probably, I suspect that, who is aware of my work after Star Wars? Who is not? Hands up. See? No idea. I'm 73 and a half years old. I didn't make my bones until 5 years after that, after Star Wars. I actually began to do work that was meritorious and had value. But you're basing your assumptions about me on work that I did as an inept 25-year-old. Imagine. Now you want to talk about fucking bitterness? You want to talk about blind rage? You want to talk about inchoate anger? There it is. Okay? I know how good I am. Understand? There are people who see the problem with American comic books and American culture in general is that self-deprecation is often mistaken for self-loathing. And the reality is it's also actually, it's an engine of self-awareness and self-acknowledgement. I know how good I became. And that's the element of my self-deprecation, because the work that people worship for that I did is chazarai and junk. And it's pointless shit. And yet when I did work of value, of merit, which made my career, it vanished because it ceased to have the agenda and language that was identified in the checkbox of this is what we like, this is what is good, this defines quality. You know, it's like the first time you taste actual ravioli, when you've been eating Chef Boyardee all your life, it's a disenfranchising experience. Because we're those little pebbles of meat. You know, first time you taste real, actually prepared al dente pasta, as opposed to Franco-American SpaghettiOs, it is a disorienting experience. Comic book fans do not like to be disoriented. The audience for comic books tends to seek satisfaction and comfort. Comics are much more like macaroni and cheese than they are like spaghetti carbonara. Okay, they are a comfort food. And the most successful comic books are the ones that go right to your prejudices and concerns and tell you that you're fine, that it's okay, it's all right. I see this through the scrim of my own wife's experience, because my wife has never read a comic book in her life. She's very smart, and she has no idea what I do for a living. Barely. Are you arting today or are you writing today? And seeing the world that you and I work in, that we live in, through her eyes, is an enlightening experience. So.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, Mahdi. I mean, I'm really good at this, and you're not.
No. I'm given a chance.
But you're not into this in a way, because so I think what happens is true for actors, movies, directors, comic book artists. You kind of get known for the one thing that was popular, and then that's how they know you for the rest of your life. Is that remember that thing you did back then, kind of thing, right? Sure. And in this case, it was fucking Star Wars, like Star Wars, like what the hell? He, Mahdi, if I'm correct, got some notoriety because of a bootleg Spider-Man comic.
Yep, exactly.
But then it brought people to hopefully see what you were doing, right? That's
Absolutely.
But it's the brought to part.
Right.
That's the part. That's the link.
Brought you.
Nothing I did brought to.
So,
None of the audience for Star Wars ever followed me elsewhere.
maybe
Pardon?
Flag.
No, not even. No. At its peak, Flag sold 40,000 copies a month, as opposed to 40,000, and that was nothing in those days.
Nothing. Those is today. It'd be about-
No, 40,000 copies today. I would own you, and you would be my bitch.
But how, if you think about a universe where you didn't do Star Wars, what does that look like?
Can we get
I
that
would have no
book?
career. No, because basically, what Star Wars got me to work with Byron, and Byron working for Byron Price was the punishment for working for Byron Price was the punishment for hubris, and ultimately I evolved. You know, one of the problems with being the smartest guy in comics is it's a low bar, and again, I mean that. I'm a really smart guy. I mean, I'm a complete autodidact. I'm totally self-educated. I had absolutely no. I mean, I dropped out of college 4 months in because I was too high, and really, and you know, I would not have the courage to live the life that Mahdi is living or that Dean is living, because I am too middle class. I was raised on welfare and in poverty, and I have a really deep respect for the comforts of life. In my life, I prefer comfort and privacy to money and power and prestige. I really love the comforts of life. I live at the beach. I live 5 doors from the Pacific. My goal is to be dead before the tsunami takes out my street, and be dead before I go blind. And these are all just issues. And at my age, these are things you think about. But I'm in awe. I mean, I've said this to you more than once. You know, that I lack the conviction. I live in a state of constant doubt, you know, and that doubt informs my respect for guys like Mahdi and guys like Dean, who are doing work that is the adverse of what the audience thinks it wants. You know, the audience is delighted to have its passions satisfied. It does not want its passions questioned. Okay?
But you did that divided? You did that with
Yeah, that pissed a lot of people off. Yeah, because basically people were reading their own prejudices into the material and presuming, because there's a scrim through which material is read. Anything you produce is, you know, I loathe Will Eisner on a personal level. He was a truly awful human being. I despised him I liked his work, up to a certain point, but I loathed him personally. And I shared this with a couple of other people. There are people who studied with him. And Drew Friedman told me a great story. He said that someone Will Haig told him, "You remind me a lot when I was young." And of course, a friend of his then said, "Well, of course, everything reminds Will Eisner of Will Eisner."
Oh.
And that to a certain extent is the mirroring that exists in popular franchises. When people talk about how they need someone to root for, to relate to in a story, what they're telling you is they want their story told in that context. That they're unwilling to take a leap and experience the other, an alien idea. And I like alien ideas. I like transgression. I like being confronted with having to judge someone who's a character, a franchise, which has no bearing on my life. I mean, I've never cared at all about M. Night Shyamalan since I loved Unbreakable. Great script, not a great movie. I'm curious about this new movie, Trap, because it makes you root for a guy who's a good old dad taking his daughter to a quasi Taylor Swift concert, who's also been murdering women in his basement. And I'm really fascinated by that idea. When someone starts talking about how much they need someone to root for, it's time for you to accept your infantilization and start watching Friends again. Jump in.
No, I think with your generation, you guys were kind of stuck in you guys needed people to make the stuff that you wanted to make.
And what do you mean?
Like you needed a publisher. There wasn't a ready, accessible printing. There wasn't distribution.
True.
And my generation, I see a relentless optimism and a freedom that has been unattainable before. And so my peers and I, our ideas can be limitless because, comics I feel like is a deeply nostalgic medium, right? And I think there's ways to tap into that nostalgia without necessarily giving them the exact subject matter of that nostalgia. For example, the Merry Marching Marvel Society. I did my own version of that for the Superhero Zenith Guild of America, where it's...
Do you pronounce Zenith?
How do you pronounce it?
No, it's okay. It's the English pronunciation.
The Queen.
By Queens, you mean Flushing or Cuba?
But anyway, so I created my own version of that to also bring back some of that whimsy and some of that nostalgia. So it's a subscription that you pay. It was like 13 cents a day, and every year you get a different package, which included pins and all these things. And when I released that, the way people reacted was wonderful. People were just subscribing. They were showing off their cards. They bring their cards to the conventions. They're like, I'm a card-carrying member of the... So you bring back that whimsy, and being able to have the freedom to do that just lets your artistry you forget about the future. I don't want to think about the future. I'm not there. I don't want the beach yet. I want the drawing board, and I want to just express the art. And the fact that I can, Dean, everybody around my generation, we can pencil, ink, letter, write, edit, print, distribute, and keep all the money is fantastic because, sure, my first print runs were financed by my coffee job, but then my second print runs were financed by the first print run, and so on and so forth. So you become businessmen, you become entrepreneurs, you become all these things. And I think that does nothing but add to the optimism of our, the upcoming generation.
No, I think that's fantastic. I really do. I find it admirable.
If you were his age at this point and doing the kind of work that he's doing, would you be wanting to do all the stuff that he's doing?
Well, I do. Look, I took a different route than all of my colleagues. My generation is defined. We were all, with one exception, all stoners. Seriously. My first San Diego convention, was the 3 days at the El Cortez Hotel, and I was on acid all 3 days, and I wasn't alone. I was 24 years old, and it was, we were fucked up. And most of the generation that my colleagues, my contemporaries, found a character to attach themselves to, and built a career and built a base out of that character. And I realized that the closest I ever came to that was Star Wars. But I could never have taken that franchise and continued to do the work because it was so utterly beneath my interest and dignity. So I ended up doing other stuff. And I have interests that are, I was at a at a comic book convention. I don't remember where. Around the time Cocoon came out, it might have been San Diego, and everyone in the movie was talking. We were at a party in one of the rooms, and everyone was talking about Cocoon, and people were loving it. And Sergio Aragones, and I both evinced discomfort with the movie because the movie reflected a mindset that we were entitled to be rescued from our own lives by an outside force. And that's how I felt. The movie left me very uncomfortable in that regard, despite the fact that Don Amici, I love Don Amici, and it started me thinking, and I walked back the cat to see how that had impacted on my relationship to the comic books that I'd come to love as a child. I mean, I was introduced to comics at the age of 4, and the same year as the Comics Code Authority was instituted, and by the time I became a working professional, all I wanted to be was a superhero artist. And the minute that the dime dropped on that, I lost my interest in it because I wasn't good enough to do them on a level that they were being done. It must be understood that my colleagues and I assumed we were the last generation of superhero, because we were now with superhero comics, because they were being drawn by 40-year-old guys like our dads. And then along come Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz and Jim Starlin, who's older than me but came in later, to demonstrate a way of doing superhero comic books that were unlike what Stan wanted, because Stan no longer cared about that. She was busy doing something else, and Roy was willing to be open to this. And we were flummoxed and never recovered from this. So guys like Walter, who was never a superhero guy in my experience, became the Thor guy, you know? And what does that say? Well, I can't read it from here.
15 minutes.
Shake it a little bit. Oh, it's 15 minutes. Thank you very much. So, you know, and I realized I could not do that, and I didn't get good enough until I found I totally outgrew my interest in this work. I still refer to it as super laser mutant dragon super monster shit, you know. And I wanted to do other stuff. I wanted to do porn. I wanted to do adventure stuff. I wanted to do historicals. I had other interests. I read books, and I outgrew fantasy fiction in the 1970s, and it was all science fiction, science fantasy, and the swords and shit like this. Enough with this, and it has not served me in any way. Also, I like to write funny, and I don't mean leaden whimsy. I mean absolute funny shit. My philosophy goes right back to Jack Cole's Plastic Man. Thrills, chills, and laughs. Okay. Black Kiss, as filthy as it is pretty funny. It's dirty and funny, you know. And I like doing. What are you doing now? Well, I just finished a 96-page book about a guy who's becomes a soldier of fortune in a war between 2 railroads in 1912. Commercial gold. And I'm really proud of the work. I did a fine job on it. But you know, for an audience that is obsessed with Super Dragon, laser monster, stupid shit, what? You know? So
I think we're finding that the old school and the new school is kind of, you have the same interests and the same kind of desires.
Yeah, but you guys do what you want. The old school basically did with it what they were supposed to do, or
Told to do.
I have a question behind you, Dean. Stand up and be judged.
Well, one of the things that, because you were talking about Star Wars and then what that did, and I'm thinking about as makers of things now and how the relationship with the audience is changing, but it occurs to me that Star Wars was actually one of the first times when the process of making the thing, not just the movie and not just the comic book, the process of making it, like so those Ralph and Corey pictures, the concept that you could buy the screenplay. It's the first screenplay I ever read because it was available. So, and you could get this idea that you could go make things for yourself, and it opened up over decades that this idea that is now, I think, unwinding here about how you become that mechanism. So actually, because you brought that up, and I just realized I have that comic that I saved up for when I was a kid because it was a way of holding the movie.
Right. Well, that's what I mean by the Old Testament.
And I could revisit it, and it could be there with the music and playing the stuff, but also the books about the making. And we started culturally talking about how to make these things.
To good and evil. To good and evil.
Yes.
I mean, about a year ago, there was a meme floating around about comics broke me.
Yeah.
By that douchebag from England, Rich Johnston. I name him. He's just a horrible person. Hey, Rich. And what the subtext of it was, regardless of what other people might have thought, is that it somehow comics owed its makers attention, and a living. And when I responded to this, I thought about you, you know, because you're a guy who make it whether or not, you know, and that there's this idea that comics are a do-it-yourself medium, and they may be in the most primitive sense,
Yep.
but they have a language and a syntax and a franchise that is worthy of respect. And I found that there are too many people who wake up one morning and say, hey, I think I'll do a graphic novel. Just because, you know, I can, you know what I'm saying? I can't play the piano, but I'm going to write a symphony today because I can and feel like it, you know what I'm saying? What the fuck, you know? My wife, who has no idea what I do for a living, keeps asking me, why don't you write a novel? I said, because I'm a comic book man. I think about the world in the realm of comic book panels and images. It's how I see storytelling. It's how I see narrative. You know, and what?
One more to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Whenever I have to pitch stuff nowadays, there's a question that's asked I respect, but I also hate it. It's like, who's the audience for this? Who's your audience?
Who is
Who's
the
your
audience?
guy?
I have no audience. I don't think about the audience at all. Because if I did, I'd kill myself.
Well, look at Hey Kids Comics. Who's the audience for that?
Look, the fact that I haven't gotten the shit kicked out of me for Hey Kids Comics demonstrates that nobody's reading it. Yeah, but
if you haven't read it, it's an amazing story.
the fact that my colleagues have not kicked my ass.
Yeah.
Because there are people in there who are presented who should never speak to me again. I wouldn't speak to me again if I said those things about me.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Audience is
Whoever it is.
yeah.
Who's your audience?
I don't know. The people who buy the books and
Yeah.
enjoy it. But I mean, like my industry that I'm in, it's the Wild West. Like, you can do whatever you want. I took a Spider-Man character and I completely turned it on its head as a fun parody, and I'm so under the radar, but I'm still making a living that no one cares. And so Marvel's not gonna send me the, hey, you gotta stop it, because nobody's seeing it. But enough people are seeing it to make me happy. Are you laughing at me? Are you getting people to laugh at me? He's calling people to laugh at me? Proxy? But anyway, but just to say that there's, yeah, so
So, your conversation about being able to do all of the things that you need to be able to publish a comic book.
yeah.
Not everyone has the ability to do that. I came from the American independent film side,
Right.
and there are people that do what you say they do.
Right.
You know, they can create, finance, make pictures,
Sure.
but that's not everyone in the business.
That's
Just like
yeah.
like people in the comic book business don't have the ability to do all those things that you do, or the balls to do it, which is, you know, could be one or the other or both.
Yeah, I mean,
So it takes someone who understands all of that and who's willing to take a chance to do it. There aren't that many people that have that ability.
that's true. I mean, I agree. Not everyone can just say. Yeah,
I mean, Howard doesn't want to publish.
yeah.
One of the reasons I avoided doing a crowdfunder for so long is that I did not want to do the administration effort. You know?
Right.
A lot of people don't.
And the other reason is that because I have no commercial footprint, I assumed it would fail.
Right.
And I'm oversensitive enough to have my feelings hurt.
But I think that is the major blocker of most people is self-imposed restrictions. Where I'm not a great letterer, but I'll still letter my comics because fuck you. You know, it's like I can. It's my comic.
I think that's silly.
For sure, but I agree. But
I mean,
can I say the first
you told me yesterday my first words to you.
Yeah, exactly. I'll repeat now.
Say it.
Baltimore Comic Con, I go up to Howard Chaykin with all my books in my hand, giddy, and I show it to him, and he's looking at it or whatever. He looks at me, he's, how old are you? I go, I was 32 still at the time. I go, 32. He goes, you should be better.
I also said something else.
What did you say?
I said, have you ever heard of a ruler?
Yes. I'll let that one slide. Yeah. But what did
It's a good one though. You got to admit.
But what I did was I went home and I did be better. I kept going because I don't get my feelings hurt. If I ask you for advice or your opinion, I take it. And I did use a ruler. I penciled the ruler, but I ink freehand because I'm still me. You know what I mean?
That seems that seems counterintuitive.
It's the feeling, you know.
Yeah, but feeling is bullshit. Thinking is what matters.
So, Mahdi, when you hear Howard talk,
So, can you stand up and be judged?
yeah, I'm sorry.
We'll get to you in a second.
Pete Weiser. So, question: when you hear Howard talk and you have all this life experience, do you go to somebody like him and ask questions? Do you see that the things that he admitted to earlier that he did wrong and take that as a lesson, or you just basically say like fuck that, I'm blazing my own trail?
I think the same approach I do when I travel to somewhere. Like I went to Rome.
Not my favorite city.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
I like Florence.
I've never been.
Florence is good.
But I go to Rome and I don't really have interest in the attractions.
Right.
I don't want to go to that. I want to sit in a cafe and I want to watch and I want to observe and I want to immerse myself in the place. And so same thing when I talk to, I haven't asked you anything about your career, I just talk because I want to see what you're about.
Right. We'll talk about it over dinner.
Exactly, yeah. I want to see the feeling. I want to get things. And then little by little, you'll have these nuggets that'll come out organically. And each life is different. So I don't think to myself, I don't want to move to California. I don't have a wife. Maybe I will. You should. But it's just, it's not the same experiences. And so you take what you take. Huh?
Where do you live?
Bay Ridge.
Of course. Brooklyn. Quasi-Italian lifestyle.
I'm Albanian.
I swear to God. And I can take it. Vinny Bombats. Stand up and identify.
You talk about not having a commercial program, but somebody must have noticed you went to television, which not all of your peers went into, and then you made this money you talk about this career that then a lot of people.
That came from the critical attention that Flag derived. That's where that the jobs came from there.
Yeah, and then that made enough money that then you can come back to comedy.
And do whatever I fucking wanted.
Right. So
Look.
it sounds like a little bit of thinking into.
Look, I'm not wealthy, but I am very comfortable. I never have to work again. Okay? I no longer work for money. Okay, the money that's coming out of the crowdfunder is going to pay Ken Bruzenak and Gustavo Yan and Don Cameron, who are doing the digital stuff, the color stuff, and the lettering stuff. So I can afford to work for nothing. The money I take from that is paying them. Okay, I have a very healthy WGA pension, and I take care of myself. I own my house outright because I took real serious stock and account of how the world actually functions and works. But I owe everything to working on really shitty television, truly. And when I got fired from my last job, I realized I never wanted to see these people again. That I wish they would all die and taste their own blood. They were. Huh?
It's a good story.
You know the story.
I know.
Well, do you mind if I close?
I think we have one more question.
Yeah, stand up, please.
Matt Sario, you had mentioned real quick that like some people wake up and decide to do a graphic novel. Are you talking about like celebrities, or because like right now there's kind of like this awakening of people because of technology and how it's easy to print books and do things. Like there's a huge, not huge, because you only said it's like 250,000 people, but there's a huge group of people that are like self-publishing.
Yeah.
And some people are just they decide to do it one day and then they do the hustle and they're like, oh, this isn't for me. But like, I don't think it's a bad thing that people are like.
Look, but
that was me.
Yeah, but don't expect to be taken seriously just because you do it. That's the issue. That's the thing. I mean, it's like Madonna doing a children's book. What the fuck? When did celebrities all of a sudden have the innate skill set to write children's books? They have children. Oh yeah, I do too.
And how many goes for it?
Yeah, really.
Speaking of the alcohol, when you talk about being taken seriously.
Too many of the people who I was talking about in the Comics Broke Me presumed that doing the work would be a guarantor of attention and success. And I, for example, I think Mahdi's running the same boat, expect nothing. I expect nothing from the audience.
Well, interestingly enough, the first comic I ever made, I remember I went to all the comic shops in New York and none of them took it. I said, okay, something's wrong with me here, I gotta redo it. So I did it again, and I went back and they took it, but none of them sold. So I went back and collected them again. I was like, I gotta do this again. And then I did it, and then they accepted it, and then they started selling. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm on to something. And so I kept going, and then it kept snowing.
But your expectations are minimal.
No, yeah.
I mean that's it. I mean, I understand completely why the audience doesn't love my work. I truly do, because I don't satisfy their needs and conditions. But my needs and conditions are satisfied daily. I'm a happy guy. I mean, most people who are not smart enough to understand it mistake the idea of happiness for comfort and calm. I'm a happy guy, but I'm also really pissed off. You know, and the two things function independently and together perfectly happily. It's good.
Just like the old school and the new school.
There you go. Look at that, a coda. All right. On that note, indeed.
You want to tell that Viper story? We got it?
No. I'm good. When I was sitting at Toronto Airport, I told you this. Right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting at Toronto Airport and realized I've never been fired in my life. And I'm talking to my spiritual advisor, and it's Saturday morning, and he says, you have to pray for these people, Bruce. And I said, he recorded this, that fuck. I said, I pray that he gets ass cancer and a brain tumor and eats his way through his fat fuck English Jew body to find a shriveled fucking turd that he uses for a heart. And he said, that will work for today. Poetry in motion.
Are we good?
I think so. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And all you guys who just walked in, you missed the opportunity to have your lives fucking transformed.